Everyone hits a bump in the road. What do you do with it? Be inspired as we explore the ways people experience, navigate, and manage the ups and downs and twists and turns in this road trip called life. Welcome to another episode of Bump in the Road. The basic podcast is always free. We also have a premium subscription called Bump 2 that lets you listen in on extended behind-the-scenes conversations with our guests. Check it out at www.bumpintheroad.us. This podcast is about the wisdom of the spiritual warrior. And for this discussion, I've invited Gary Hensel and Deborah Kozich to join me. We look at topics such as what is a spiritual warrior and why is it a path worth pursuing? What path do you choose to pursue? And what wisdom might come from it? This video episode is available on YouTube as well as your favorite podcast platform. Hi, welcome to this first in a series that I'm calling The Way of Wisdom. And today's discussion is about the spiritual warrior. And it's based on some of Gary Hensel's writings. He has several books, Lessons from a Spiritual Warrior, I Am, Notes to a Younger Me. They're all fantastic books. Let me give you a brief introduction of everybody here. Gary Hensel is an award-winning teacher, social media influencer, and best-selling author. He's written 5 books and is always working on his next. He served 20 years in academia as a tenured professor and department chair. He speaks with over 150,000 readers every day from all over the world. His books, interviews, and social media postings have been read and watched by people from over 150 countries. Deborah Kozich's passion is helping others identify their innermost passions and desires. She's a seeker of love and light in all areas of life. She has numerous coaching certifications and is the co-author of Absolute Love, 12 Principles of Love in Life and Business. Through Deborah K. Coaching, she empowers women to reclaim their passion and superpower to live an extraordinary life. I'd love to open today's discussion just with a question. What is a spiritual warrior?
Deborah, you go first.
I would love to answer that. And being able to become aware of even what a spiritual warrior is, I want to first thank Gary for bringing his book, The Spiritual Warrior, to our presence as a gift. The spiritual warrior to me is being someone who's able to turn pain into power and shadows into light. And that is one of the most famous quotes in his book. And it so resonates with me because so often going through life, we don't know what to do when we encounter pain or hurt or a situation that we aren't sure which way to turn, what to do. So we get stuck. And so until we realize that we have that warrior within, which is a spiritual warrior, once we recognize who it is, what it is, it allows us to move forward with the light being that we are. So for me, the spiritual warrior is acknowledging the light within and to be able to stand with courage through whatever may happen in life so that we can have a way to see our way through it with courage and confidence as a warrior, fighting through it and not giving up.
I like that. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Yeah. No, thank you, Gary.
Gary, how do you see a spiritual warrior?
Oh, me? Okay. Well, Deborah just did it. No, she did a beautiful job, and I talk about for whatever reason, my life has had just extreme highs and extreme lows, and you can easily fall into that feeling like a victim, the why me, especially when life's really hitting you and, a lot of hard things are going on. And, you might envy somebody that seems on the surface to you to have an easy life, but I wouldn't obviously have done all the growing without all of those hard times. And, that I talk about too, and I think Deborah spoke about it here, and you did too, Pat, looking for the gift in every situation. And it's not always easy to do, obviously, when you're down in there. And you know, life, or is it, whether it's medical, and certainly Pat, with your background, and I love your book too, Pat.
Thank you.
And can you grow? I think we know a lot of people in life that just are very angry, very frustrated, very you can just feel them. I realized as I got older, that I'm probably what now is defined as like an empath. I can really feel people's energy, and I've been able to do that all my life. And as I've gotten older, I've been able to, even become better at that. And I can walk into a room and just get really strong feelings. And I can feel people that are just carrying a lot of anger and unhappiness, And so the pivotal moment is when you're going through these really tough times. You have two choices. You either, fall into that victimhood, and many times that turns into anger and resentment and prejudices and, all types of things like that. Or you can say, I got to, I've experienced this pain. I've paid this dues. I need to pull something out of this, something positive, something optimistic, to give it meaning, and Viktor Frankl is one of my favorite authors. His Man's Search for Meaning, and really all of his life's work was that concept that you have to have a purpose, and when you have a purpose, then you can go on, and then you can live a productive and happy life, even with all the setbacks. So, I think one of the real foundation pieces is the idea that, can you grow? Can you gain wisdom from these really hard moments in your life?
I know one of my mantras has become, what can I learn? Anything that I confront anymore, I look at it as, what can I learn? And it always turns the question back on me. How am I perceiving things? What are my biases? What are my beliefs? And when I examine those, I find I can learn an awful lot from very ordinary situations.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think when Gary was talking, and going back to the title of his book, I'm thinking about a spiritual warrior, and a warrior has a suit of armor. He has a way to defend his rights of being. So as a spiritual warrior, you're putting on that suit of armor. And for me, that would be learning how to identify with what love is. So often we have been raised to believe love might be hurtful, or that's what we were taught to believe. So we have to make those wise decisions as a spiritual warrior to pay attention to what absolute love is, meaning unconditional love, so that we can bring forth the warrior within, so that we can nurture ourselves through whatever obstacles that we face as humans, having the spiritual experience as humans. So then we're able to better navigate those bumps in the road that do happen.
Hey, Absolute Love would be a great book title, Deborah.
Yes. I'm working on another one.
I'm going to take exception with the idea of armor, because I think the real strength lies in setting the armor aside and kind of transcending these bumps and difficulties, and finding compassion, empathy, love through those experiences.
Yeah. And building on both of your ideas, when you're down there, says, why does life keep hitting me? Why do I keep having these setbacks, these heartbreaks, these illnesses? So many external factors are affecting my happiness. And if you can accept that, well, maybe it's because I know it's kind of cliche, but maybe it's because you're strong enough. Maybe it's because you're the type of person that can grow and learn from these situations. whether you call it God or the universe or life, whatever your particular comfort level is, but you are, in a sense, being tested. Are you going to choose the path of anger and fear? Or are you going to choose the path of love and growth, in those moments? So potentially why you're being beat up so much is because you're a person that has the potential, the opportunity to continue to grow. And then big part of being a spiritual warrior is helping others, see and believe in themselves and grow themselves.
Yeah, Gary, you're right. They help others find healing. It is the way of the spiritual warrior.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Go ahead, Deborah. What were you going to say?
That's one of my favorite quotes in the book. There's many. I know that you asked me to share my favorite quotes, and I ended up with more than what I had agreed upon because they just kept coming forward. But just reflecting on the spiritual being of who we are to navigate obstacles. What's helped me is to see and ask powerful questions. Connecting with my higher source, whatever that may be. I often find my wisdom or the spiritual wisdom coming forth from nature, and asking those questions there, because then you're in silence, you're in stillness, and then you can ask those questions. And when those things keep happening to us, because we're going through some major transitions right now too, and sometimes you just want to give up, you just want to say heck with it all, but then you really have to stop and say, what is the lesson in this? What is it that I'm supposed to be learning in this so that I can grow and help others grow too? So that's what I really enjoyed that you shared that, Gary, because it is about serving others and helping others. As we learn, then we reach out and we help others go through it too. And it just raises our consciousness even higher. And then we learn to respond versus reacting. We come back to our higher self of being, which is what I love, the power of I am. And that was a great transformation for me, is once I was able to connect with my higher source and trust that whatever I'm going to say it, God is, because there was a time I didn't believe in God, and whether it be a creative energy, a spirit of source, creative energy, whatever we call it, it's a higher power. And once we can connect with that, then that's where my spiritual warrior wants to play and say, hey, you know what? I'm okay. And whatever that energy that is of love, of divine wisdom, I am too. And that allows me to then put on my courage navigation pants and say, you know what, there's a way through this, and I'm going to be guided through this, and I'm going to trust the process. And it gives me the strength that I need and the courage that I need to not give up.
Yeah. And I love how you talked about nature. And I know you post frequently a lot of nature walks that you're doing, and I'm the exact same way. I actually moved to a warm climate so I could be outside every day, and I have to be surrounded by nature, and I have to find stillness in it. And you can find that on a hike. You can find that in meditation. I do grounding as much as I can every day. And I really believe in that. And so, yeah, nature is very important. It's like it's a tool to connect to that higher self. And when you can get those, really, it's a tool to find stillness. And in the stillness, what's already inside of you will come out, And so for all of us, even when we're living crazy, hectic lives, we need to strive to look for stillness as much as we can, because the answers are all there already.
I like that, is where in nature is where I can get in tune to what I call whispers, because we get so caught up in the world and surviving and thriving, that it's so important to take time to to be more. And like I share with my clients, less doing and more being, because the more you can be, then the more productive you are in the doing. And it's so important to take time to nurture yourself in nature and to listen to those wisdom whispers. Yeah.
Yeah. And
I have not.
go ahead,
No,
go ahead, Pat.
No, after you.
I was in the corporate world when I started out, and I would work 100 hours a week, and was always giant to-do list and, just doing, and I was in human resources. So I felt like I was making a difference, but it's still, I wasn't in a place of being as much as I should have. And so then I was, pulled to go towards teaching, and I found some of that, but still in academia, there's a lot of politics, and there's more of a rat race than you would like to see in that. So I taught for 20 years, but it was actually an illness, and I talked to Pat on an earlier podcast about this, that really stopped me in my tracks. And at the time, it forced me to retire much earlier than I had hoped to. And of course, with that, you have financial setbacks and that type of stuff. But the gift out of it was I learned to slow down. I learned to listen to my body. I learned to find stillness. I learned to enjoy the simple things in life. When I was teaching, I always said, well, someday, I'm going to write a great book. It was just one of those passion projects, but it never got done, because I was always way too busy, and I also had 6 kids, and besides teaching, and I was always taking courses too, so it really was the illness that opened the door for me to be able to start writing. And so sometimes your life looks a little different than what you thought it would be, what you have this vision, yeah. But again, whether you call it God or the universe, and there's other plans for you, and sometimes it looks differently. I know, like, if I wouldn't have started writing, I would probably never be on social media. I'm not that type of guy. I know it sounds funny because I have, lots of followers, but I did it because, a publisher recommended I start, but it became a whole animal in itself.
Mm-hmm.
I just started posting quotes from my book and quotes from other great thinkers throughout time, and it just organically grew. And it is as big or as important as my books now. I spend several hours a day. I wake up in the morning and I have messages from all over the world, South Africa, Australia, India, Russia, Brazil, and people they're going through a bankruptcy or a divorce or a major illness, even war, anything you can think of. And they just ask me a question or thank me, and so obviously they're taking the time to share their energy. And so I need to, like you say, it's become an animal in itself. And again, I never would have questioned, even going back 20 years ago or 10 years ago when I started writing, I never would have thought that a huge portion of my life is getting on social media and communicating with people, and we talk about it's important who you surround yourself with. And I really believe in that core concept. And so many people say so many negative things about the internet, about social media, about the social media platforms. But I have all these wonderful people like both of you. And I've met people from all over the world, and I've got to speak in other parts of the world just because of social media. And there's just so many like-minded people that are spiritual warriors. They're trying to grow. They're trying to find happiness and love and improve themselves. And I find very little negativity on social media at all. Once in a while, somebody will say something silly, and I just ignore them. I never talk about politics on my sites.
Yep.
It's not what my site is about. And so there is a lot of beautiful people out there that I would have never met if it was not for social media. And really, obviously, in the big picture of things, social media is just extremely new. It hasn't been around that long, and now I know, like yesterday, my internet went out, and it's crazy how much you do on there, and I'm kind of in an area where the phone coverage isn't really good without internet either, because I'm kind of up in a higher elevation and things like that, and so it was kind of good because it forced me just to put down my phone and I was outside doing work projects and stuff, but that's how our life has changed so much just in the last 20 years. And there's certainly negatives about it. People get on there and just dump hatred, but there's also just a lot of beautiful things that are coming out of it. So I think as a whole, it's a good energy. It's a tool to communicate and to share and to grow. And I wouldn't know both of you without it.
Well, I would like to say too that it's an opportunity to help us navigate the bumps in the road, because it's all in what we're looking for. And Gary, I would not have been connected with you or with Pat either. And there's so many wonderful connections. And like one of your quotes says, you were born to illuminate the darkness. And so with that, we're able to do that in avenues of social media, of helping others through podcasts, to making ourselves available so that we can help others navigate whatever bumps they may be going through. And if we look at as social media as an avenue to help others navigate as well, then if that's our message, then that's what we'll attract as well, because then we become the light to help others become the light too. Yes. It's an opportunity, actually. Yeah.
I think it's an opportunity too. I just don't allow negativity or politics into my feed. I don't respond. I see very little of it, and I don't respond. And I have met amazing people all over the world. Mm-hmm. One of Gary's quotes that so speaks to this is, "Does your path have heart? Is there passion in your steps? If not, choose another."
I love that.
And I think that when you have positive passion in that light, it comes through loud and clear, particularly in a venue like social media.
Yeah, we have a choice. And it's wonderful that we have a choice.
Yeah.
We were talking about nature earlier. Oh, no, go ahead, Gary.
No, go ahead, Pat. Let's talk about nature.
I think nature is so profound. I talk about it, I know, in my book. And one of the things that you say in your book, one of your books, Gary, is look for beauty in simple moments. And I know for me, going through 6 years of cancer treatment, I surprisingly discovered an enormous reservoir of joy. And I had joy over so many simple things. And and mostly it was in nature. It was a hummingbird, a butterfly, the feel of the sun on your skin, the feel of the wind as it passed by. And there was so much beauty in those simple moments. And I love that quote of yours for that reason, because I think that if we can all be more present, slow down, and just be as opposed to do, I think there's enormous beauty and joy all around us.
Yeah. One of my favorite healing moments is when I was going through a very difficult time. I would go for walks and I'd take my journal with me. And the way of releasing was what I would hear from wisdom in nature. So I would release it by writing it down so that I could allow the negative energy to flow out from me. And then I would be able to then allow feelings of love to come back to me, because I had actually given up on even what love was, because I had been misled. I allowed myself to be misled. I made some poor choices, and I was looking for love in all the wrong places. So connecting with nature allows you to come at a deeper level. And I've learned to see beauty in all things with eyes of love. And I could not have done that if I had not experienced that in nature, because that's what nature does for us. It allows us to see at a deeper level. You hug a tree, it gives you so much wisdom. And to know that it can stand through all of time with strength and courage, and to know that you're connected with that same energy, that we can have that same courage and wisdom too. And it's such a place to go for nourishment and regeneration. I know Gary had said he likes to do earthing, and I love to take my shoes off and play with my toes in the water and my feet in the grass, because you actually get nourishment there too. And I know in a lot of my little videos that I do, I always like to share the importance of getting vitamin D as well. It lifts our serotonin levels, which is our feel-good hormones. So nature offers so many benefits, and it really helps with depression and anxiety and overcoming sadness and grief.
Yeah, we talked about earlier, I moved to a climate where I could be outside a lot, and one thing is I need sunshine. I just have to have, I've always responded very positive to sunshine, and not so well to, like I spent a lot of years in the Midwest, and besides the cold and the snow, and the worst part was all the gray skies, where you would just go weeks at a time without seeing the sun, and I talked about it in several of my books, like you have to create an environment in your life. So for me, I needed sunshine. I needed access to outdoors as much as possible. I needed nature close by and beauty. And I'm surrounded by a federal park, a state park, and an Indian reservation.
Oh, wonderful.
Yeah. And so I could walk 1 mile from my house and be walking in a federal park, so you create that, and we have more. People say, well, I can't do that. And then we have more control over our lives than we like to admit. It's easy to fall into, I have to do this, I have to do that. And we don't, we have choices, and we create that. And so I understood, like, I need sunshine, that's important to me. It helps me. And I need to be in nature, and nature creates that stillness, and it's in the stillness that I hear the wisdom, and that's where most of my writing comes out of, stillness, and that type of thing. So, and you also talked about, Deborah, about kind of like accepting, the concept of accepting that you were in bad relationships, and we've all done that. Or took the wrong job, or, you can't, I think a spiritual warrior, we're talking about, that accepts responsibility for every part of their lives. It's not saying that there's not external things that are going to come and attack you and cut you down. And a matter of fact, I think the more, whatever word you want, enlightened you are, the more you're potentially going to be attacked by negative energy in life. But if you accept the responsibility, then you can start healing. People can go to therapy for years, and they just sit there and play the victim, in each session, and you have to accept that I made that decision. That's where I was at that point in my life. And I really think that, water seeks its own level, like attracts like, and so I've been in some bad relationships, I've made bad decisions, and you got to accept that and learn from it and grow from it. So maybe a big part of being a spiritual warrior is that self-responsibility, because what that does is empowers you. When you play a victim, you're giving your power away. But when you accept responsibility and you empower yourself.
You
One
let
of your
go of the
quotes,
blame. You're able to let go of the blame.
Yeah.
Yeah.
one of the quotes from your book is the most important lesson of spiritual growth is self-acceptance and self-love. And I think that's incredibly true because until we accept ourselves, we can't accept others.
Mhm.
Until we love ourselves, we can't love others. Until we can give empathy to ourselves, we can't give empathy to others. We have to understand our own emotions, our own perspective, our own flaws before we can start being kind and helping others through their bumps.
Yeah, my childhood created an environment where I had extremely low self-esteem as I, entered into being an adult. And I would probably say if when I look back now that I didn't love myself, and so we throw that around, and some people even challenge me frequently on social media saying, well, isn't that selfish to love yourself? But that's only on a very surface level of that type of definition. I mean, when you love yourself, you looked to get into healthy relationships. Somebody that is equal to you and be a part of you, and you work on that relationship to make it healthy. That's not being selfish. You're creating an environment where real love. There's all kinds of love out there that aren't necessarily healthy. People say I'm in love with somebody, but then you could observe their relationship and realize that's not really true. It's some semblance of fear that this relationship is built off of and continues to. So probably the biggest single lesson of my life is to learn to love myself. And I'm now in my 60s, and I'm still learning to love myself. It's easy to fall into old habits and things like that. And so that's important. I think I'm glad you brought that up, Pat, because that I think is a foundation piece, learning to love yourself. And it's very simple, on the surface, but I think people should really spend some time with that on their own. Do I really love myself? Who am I surrounding myself with? Who's my best friend? Who's my partner in life? How do they view the world? That type of thing. And yeah.
You learn to love yourself at a deeper level. And it's not dependent on others. It's not dependent on whatever you may be yearning for, because once you realize that you are love itself, because we're going back to the power of I am, once you realize that you are that love, then it's not dependent on anything else. And it creates that unconditional, absolute love energy within that creates freedom. And I love that you said learning to love yourself, you come to that heart space where the heart mind connects with your higher consciousness and reassures you that you are loved because you came from love and you are the light that ignites that love. And it's a gift that we all have. And it's once we realize that that's who we are and what we are, it helps us to overcome and adapt and achieve our dreams, possibilities, to be the light. I know Pat and I had this discussion about a week ago, because I've always said to be the light in the tunnel of life, because so many of us are looking at that, to be the light at the end of the tunnel. And so what I've done to help myself is to envision myself being the light through the tunnel of life. And if it gets dark, to turn that light on, to ignite it, and then to help others too. And then Pat said, well, what about if there wasn't a tunnel? It was an open road. And you just allowed that light to guide you on that road, to navigate you on that road of life. There's no longer a tunnel. And when you come to one, you just go through it.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
A lot.
You jump over it.
Oh, jump over it. Depends on how, hopefully there's a bridge.
I like that. And
I want to go back.
Go ahead, Pat.
Well, I want to go back to the idea of loving yourself, and I think it's very complex, actually, for most of us,
Yeah.
because it means going back. It means forgiving ourselves about making bad decisions that may have harmed us or others.
Yeah.
But I think when you start looking at that, you start to develop self-knowledge, and as you develop self-knowledge, now you can begin to possibly develop conscious choice.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I think that in order to have conscious choice, you have to find stillness first, because until you can quiet your monkey mind, you can't watch your thoughts. You can't make a conscious choice. But once you can start making conscious choices, that is a total game changer. Because now you're making choices that are really for your benefit, or for your benefit with the knowledge you have at that point in time. And as you go along and you make more and more conscious choices, you really start to evolve because you're being true to yourself. And that's something that's hard to do in a society that puts all these demands of achievement and perception on us. You're supposed to live this linear life. You go to school, you get the job, you get married, you get the house, the car, whatever. You are your house, your car, your clothes, name your material accoutrements. Yeah. Yet none of that is real.
Yeah.
And I think that until you can't dispel that illusion until you start going within and getting to really know who you are.
Yeah, and Deborah touched on earlier, to piggyback on both of your thoughts, realizing the difference between attachment and love. So many times I can't live without that person. When you hear statements,
I can't live without coffee in the morning.
Yeah. Yeah. Even, and I talk about even our children, and of course I have 6 kids. So I talk about, like, children don't come from you. Children go through you. So we always say, well, that's my child. That's my son. That's my daughter. And we have to be careful because they are separate individuals. And they have their own path that they are choosing. And the idea that, you couldn't live without them. Well, you could. And if your happiness, if your soul survival is depending on a spouse or depending on children, or even depending on a friend, then that starts moving out of what the real definition of love is. So again, and Pat talked about, I don't know, maybe 90% of people that think they're experiencing love are really experiencing things that come out of fear or loneliness, or, I think that the opposite of love is fear. So if you're not experiencing real love, real pure love, then you're probably experiencing some level of fear. So, if my spouse left me, I would not be able to go on, even if they left you like in death, right? I mean, that detachment is another huge lesson. And I know, Pat, and your book's great, Pat, too. I love it. I just bought a copy for a friend who's experiencing cancer. And I know, something with Pat is certainly talking with people that deal with illness all the time. And I've had that. And you have to detach from your own body. I say sometimes I miss my old body. I wish I could have it, for not the illness. But again, I'm bigger than my body. I'm more than my body. And if I can't live without my body being a certain way, then I'm not really emotionally healthy anyway. I don't love myself, right? So we could take care of our body. We can work hard at a romantic relationship or a friendship to take care of that relationship. We can strive to have relationships with our children, but we can't be dependent upon it. That's attachment. And attachment isn't true love. So sometimes people in our lives, we have to love from a distance. And many times that's the most purest form of love. When you understand, like let's say you had a child that had a severe drug addiction, and you're not helping them by continually trying to bail them out or give them money, or, sometimes you have to detach from that and say, I love you very much. But you're on your own journey, and I'm not helping you by creating this environment of codependency. So again, I think that's another pillar. The concept of not only loving yourself but understanding what love really is would be another part of the spiritual growth that we all need to go through.
This is a little tangential, but one of her quotes, which I really like, is, if you focus on the hurt, you will continue to suffer. If you focus on the lesson, you will continue to grow. And it doesn't even have to be hurt per se. But again, it goes back to the idea of what is the lesson. I think that's such an important piece of this. And it may be a lesson in love. It may be a lesson from nature. Lessons come from absolutely everything we encounter in our daily lives.
Yeah, and that's what we were just talking about. When you lose a relationship, either through death or, whether it's a romantic or a child or a friend, what is the lesson? Like, why did life serve you up this heartbreak? You're in tremendous heartbreak. Maybe you love somebody in a healthy fashion, but they can't love you that way back. And so again, you feel like a victim, like, why do I keep experiencing this heartbreak? But that is the lesson. Maybe them leaving was how you're going to have to learn the concept of healthy, pure love and not attachment. Does that make sense?
And maybe there is the opportunity. It's the opportunity to break patterns, to do things differently, to look within and think about what really matters to you and to pursue it. Because so often relationships end up limiting you because you have rote patterns of relating, of agreeing about just certain things and the way how things are done. But it's a much bigger world than that. And sometimes heartache. What was your quote about heartache? It's a great one. I'll find it. But sometimes that heartache is actually the best thing that can happen to you, although you can't see it at the time.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's what I was speaking about. And tremendously painful. Any of these things, the illness, the heartache, the major setback, the job loss, foreclosure, bankruptcy, you name it. I mean, life's going to beat you up. We know. We've all been on the earth for a few years, so we know nobody escapes these types of things. It's how you deal with them, the resiliency and stuff. And again, many times when you lose something, even a material thing, then you learning detachment. Like, yeah, I don't need, let's say you had your house foreclosed and now you're in a much smaller home or something. I'm still the same person without that big fancy house. I'm not any different, people can't let go of things like that, so yeah, that the resiliency and this is not a switch you're going to flip. Like I still deal with all of this stuff every day, people, there was an old quote, I can't remember now, but basically like, you don't really want to live next door to your guru, because you'd find out they were very human, that they struggle, that they make mistakes, that they have heartbreaks, that they aren't always connected to their higher self. I like to say that when things are going bad and you act, let's say, not your higher self, I always say, well, there are moments that we're all very human. We're all, but the idea is, can you more times than not. It's not like you're going to flip a switch overnight and you're going to become this perfect enlightened being that just floats, but you want to get to the point where you're enlightened more than you're not, like that scale. Maybe it's 51% or 55%, 60%, but that's the idea. That's what you're striving for. And it's not a striving that doing, it's a striving of being.
Yes.
Because it becomes effortless. And it feels good. Any moment, those moments that you're in that beautiful spiritual place, and it happens for all of us and in different ways. It's such a good feeling. Life makes sense for a few moments. You're in the flow. And so it's not a doing that you have to get back there, because it's that would be an addiction, and you don't want to be addicted to it. You want to be it.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the difference.
It's learning to love yourself. And when you're saying being, that reminds me of not only learning to not take things personal in life, but then that brings me back to the simple formula to go from doing to be your best. So no matter what you're doing in life, be your best. And then if it wasn't, when you look back, then you learn from it. And that was such a pivotal point for me once I learned that lesson, along with the power of I am, is simply be your best. I was given this book. I went to see a shaman, and she recommended the 4 agreements. And so I read them, and as I was reading them, I got really defensive. I'm like, who can do this? Who can be impeccable with their word? Who cannot take things personally? Because we're human. Who can not make assumptions? And then I'm like really getting defensive. Like, why would she give me this book to read? And so finally I got to the part, be your best. Just do and be your best. And I'm like, oh, I get it now. All you have to do is be your best, because that's all we know how to do. And as we go through life, we go through the bumps in the road, we go through changes and lessons learned. Some we don't like as much as others, as Gary said. We go through some very challenging times, but as we learn to be our best through those changes, we learn to adapt. And then we learn to be able to love ourselves through it, because we're being loving to ourselves, and it's not dependent on anything else, anybody else. It's just being our best through the process of living life. And that helps us to navigate those bumps better, just by being our best, whatever that is.
And learn to forgive yourself when you're not your best.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's another lesson too, right?
I talked about that. That's who I was in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
But in each moment, I can choose to be something different, right? So that's the part of forgiving yourself. All right, so 20 years ago, you made this decision, and you look back at it now, it looks really stupid. You wish you could change things. But that's who you were then. Mm-hmm. But now you get to choose who you're going to be.
Yeah, I'm working on a forgiveness workshop with a very close friend. And one of the protocols is to be willing and ready to release and let go, and then to say, I lovingly release whatever it was to its own lesson. And that could be yourself. I lovingly release myself to that lesson. I lovingly release whatever it was that happened to its lesson, because life is full of lessons. And I have some things that I'm dealing with right now too, that I have to lovingly release to their lessons, because they're not coming forth as I thought they would. And so you just have to trust that it's there for that purpose of growth at either end. And you just lovingly release it and let it be, and trust that you're doing your best, and you trust that that situation is being handled the best it can be, and just keep on going, loving yourself through the lesson, whatever it is, because sometimes we don't know.
Yeah. And people around you might not be on the same path or at the same speed you're on. That's a very difficult one. I deal with that all the time. And a lot of people ask me, like, well, how do I start, becoming enlightened, for lack of a better word? There's so many easy, simple ways. Like, if you find yourself criticizing other people a lot, why did they do that? Why did they say that? That's not the right thing to do. You're being judgmental. And when you're in a moment of judgment, you're not in a moment of love. And so little things like that, you can start observing in yourself and try to be less critical. And so that's the acceptance that everybody is not on the same path as me, even close family members, friends, and they might not, just like you said, when you first read the Four Agreements, you weren't necessarily, it wasn't clicking with you. Mm-hmm. Now it's just common sense to you, right? Mm-hmm. So that's how much you have grown during that time, from when you first read it to now. And that's how the people around you are. They might not be at the point where that book makes perfect sense to them.
Different levels of awareness.
Yeah.
Different levels of the paradigm of where we are on our growth process.
Yeah.
As humans.
Well, the perception you have of people,
yes.
Another quote of Gary, the perception you have of people is a reflection of yourself. How true.
Yes. I love all of Gary's quotes. They bring us right back to the spiritual warrior of who we are, or who we're, doing our best to be.
Well,
I use Gary's book every morning. I wake up, I read usually a section, and I find something that resonates with me. Then I find 5 things to be grateful for, and then I meditate every morning. And it's just such a, I've been doing this for almost 15 years now. And it struck me the other day, it is really having an impact. I had computer issues. I ordered a brand new, nice MacBook Air, right? It arrives and there's not enough RAM. Everything's crashing. And it's like, their sales literature said, but I didn't order enough RAM. So they were kind. They took the machine back, which I appreciate very much. And I ordered one with lots more RAM and everything else. But the point of this is, and I'm all losing my train of thought. The point of the story with my machine. I went to return it, and first I went to UPS, and they were like, "This is a FedEx package. We can't take it." So I had to find FedEx and drive over to FedEx and drop it off. Going through all this, I was stunned that I wasn't screaming at anybody. I wasn't angry. I wasn't tearing my hair out. It was just, okay, next, next, next. I never could have done that 10 or 15 years ago. I would have been just the customer from hell. And I wasn't. And I'm pleased with that. This stuff does add up.
Yeah, little things,
I think part of loving ourselves is learning to respond with love instead of react, and that comes through the power of awareness. And like all the things that we're talking about, it's the different levels of awareness, but that piece of it is learning how to respond lovingly without conditions, and then there's less reaction. And it's so freeing. It feels so peaceful and energizing too, because then you're not holding all that inside of you. And then you're not in a hurry to get there. And then you're responding and reacting of the what ifs or the should have or could have or would have. But you're just kind of going with the flow and trusting the process and just saying, okay, next, thank you. What's next? It feels so good just to respond versus react. It really does.
And I'm in the relationship now for 20 plus years. And it's a beautiful relationship.
Congratulations, by the way.
Thank you. And people say, oh, relationships are such hard work. Not really. It's actually effortless. Because both of us went through lots of trials when we were young in our lives, and we both chose to learn from those, and we both chose to work on ourselves, and we both were looking for somebody who was healthy, what I call it, and so it is effortless. I mean, because it's not work. And it shouldn't be, And then going to some of past examples, the same thing with life and interacting with other people. It doesn't have to be. So many times it's our expectations, what we expect of somebody, what we expect of a company, what we expect of a product, whatever, learning to accept the moment, to flow a little bit more, like when you're driving, the road rage. If you're still doing that, catch yourself and say, all right, the guy cut you off. Maybe his mother died this morning. Maybe he's late for an important meeting. You know what I mean? What good's it going to do me to be angry, to cuss, to give him a finger gesture? I mean, how's that going to help? All you're doing is just hurting yourself,
Yeah.
And so again, those small moments when you're frustrated from customer service or from somebody's driving habits, or somebody didn't respond the way you thought they should respond, that's the moments you start building for yourself. When you don't yell at that other driver, you're doing it for yourself, because I want to be happy. I don't want to go through life angry and, full of rage and upset and constantly judging people and stuff like that. And so let it go. Let the moment go. And I think Deborah talked about that. Both of you have talked about letting go. And so much of it is that, like, there's more important things than so many of these daily things we let frustrate us.
Well, what is it the Buddhists say? You will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger.
Yeah.
And that's so true. And it's true of any negative emotion you carry forward. Until you examine it and decide to release it, it will haunt you. It will pull you down. And life is far too short and far too bright to allow that to happen.
Yeah. And I the idea of, and both of you have talked about, learning forgiveness. And for instance, I have a relationship right now that was very toxic. And there was a bad incident, and I forgave the person immediately because I didn't want to carry that. And I send them love from a distance, because it's not that I didn't forgive them. I did. It's that I don't think that they're emotionally healthy to be able to have a healthy relationship with me. You can't change people. You can't make them on the same path. That's how we get frustrated a lot too. We want everybody to think exactly like we think, and that doesn't happen. And so you forgive, you let go, you move on. But that doesn't mean for instance, if it's an individual, you don't let that individual continue to hurt you, because that would be not loving yourself. So you love yourself. So I forgive you, but I choose until I believe, I observe that you're healthy enough to have a healthy relationship with me, then I choose not to have a close relationship with you.
Let's wrap up with a personal story. What is one of your best moments as a spiritual warrior?
Right now. That's actually a very good answer, because I just thought of it literally, because we need to stay in the now. So when you can be, a lot of times when I do like this, you're two beautiful minds, and I love the energy that you put out. And so when I do a podcast or a radio interview or whatever, I always feel great afterwards, because I've been talking to some great people about great things, and they have great energy. And so we're all just kind of staying in the moment and growing. For this time we've been together, life has all made sense, hasn't it? It's really easy. Probably the most important spiritual moments is the current one, I would say.
Yeah.
I can't help that. Thank you. Thank you both so much. This is just a great discussion.
Thank you for listening. I hope you'll support this podcast by becoming a Bump 2 subscriber. Buy us a cup of coffee. It's your support that makes this podcast and website possible. I hope you found something in today's podcast that inspires you along your own life's path, because sometimes a bump in the road is actually a portal into a more conscious and meaningful life.